Hello, everybody. We just had the Baeclast with Chris Wilson, kind of responding to all of the drama going on with this league. And I kind of want to do a reaction to this. I know I really haven't made much content for this league, mostly because I haven't really been enjoying it, haven't been playing the league all that much, and just kind of wanted to react a little bit to the stuff that Chris Wilson was talking about. I'm going to try to go through it really quickly so we can cover the entire 3.5 hours. Kind of a little bit of headache after everything, but there's a whole bunch of points that I want to talk about. So first thing is that one thing that kind of kept coming up during this Bay class is that Chris mentioned this thing called hard mode, which they're kind of internally working on right now. And hard mode basically is supposed to be a much harder version of Path of Exile, where basically the entire item economy has been chopped off. It doesn't exist. And like even just finding rare items or finding currency is pretty ridiculous hard to do. He also references a lot of the times like about D2 and how D2 felt and D2 mechanics. And generally my entire thought process was every single time he brought these up, I was kind of like, I don't care about hard mode. I don't care about D2. I don't probably plan to focus on hard mode, and hard mode shouldn't be brought up in terms of reacting to issues that people are having with the core game. And so hard mode is actually kind of one of the reasons why this patch ended up being such a murder fest of nerfs. And basically the idea was that instead of nerfing super hard in the core game, that they were going to nerf in this more difficult version of Path of Exile and see how it went. And the idea of this was to not lose player base due to drastic nerf swings. And for some odd reason, they just didn't put it into hard mode. Like they just actually just put it right in the core game, as I'm sure you're probably aware. Now, there were a lot of topics that they went over, but I kind of just wanted to talk about hard mode right off the gate. Like, it sounds really cool. I'd be interested in playing it. Definitely not as a core game mechanic, not as a league that I would want to main. And in fact, a lot of times we kind of already have this hard mode thing. Basically, you can just run up a private league where rares and blues no longer drop. And that drastically reduces the amount of good items you get, drastically reduces the amount of currency you get because you're not able to vendor for transmutes and alterations. Now, I do understand that currency would even be more pushed down, but generally these no rares, no magics tend to not be very popular in the first place. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. It's cool. It's kind of a thought experiment type of thing. I really hope that they don't go through with pushing it out in the same way they pushed out Soul Self out. Next up, they talked about a lot of things, and I'm probably going to miss some of the things in here, but they talked about making bosses drop good items and good uniques, and how possibly adding some of the boss drops to the core pool might have been a mistake. If you didn't notice that basically all of the Shaper Guardian uniques are now part of the core pool. A lot of the like Shaper drops themselves have been relentlessly and methodically like nerfed and reduced in power. And so generally the best drop I think off of Shaper right now is the fragment for Uber Elder. So that seems kind of bad. They talked about adding more chase uniques, and Chris actually even promised, I believe like later in the podcast, that the next set of uniques that they put out for the league, all of them are going to be good, which means maybe one or two of them will be good. Yeah. It's just very, very strange. Very strange. Generally, boss uniques are just not very good. Basically, almost all of the Maven loot is not very great. They have way too many drawbacks for too few positives. Yes, I know the hat is pretty popular, but in general, a lot of uniques recently have needed a lot more power to feel good. I'm not sure what they're going to do about that, but we'll see. Next, they talked about adding more tools and ability to invest to avoid ailments and reduce ailments. And in fact, they even talked about how Their current state of Flasks, they're not happy with. And they even thought about just hard reverting back to the Flask piano state in the middle of this league, which, some people like the new stuff. I personally think that the new Flask mechanics feel kind of bad unless you have the ability to get exactly the mod you want on the flasks that you need. And then apparently they're really nice. And so I think that there's a little bit too much of a barrier to entry there, and they're talking about adding more options for dealing with ailments and other things on the tree, crafting mods, cluster, and then for flask crafting, they might even add tiers of mods. So there'd be like adrenaline 1, 2, 3 type of thing where like there's different tiers on flasks. This is kind of interesting. I mean, generally you don't need a flask that's any higher item level than like 32 or something. I'm not sure how I feel about like needing to find like an I-84 Quicksilver to roll the perfect mods, because even now with like our limited pool of mods on flasks, it can be a little bit difficult just to get the 2 mods you need, and it just turns into a lot of alt and augment spam. Even like I've annulled flasks several times to try to get the 2 mods I need, and it's a lot more difficult than you would think when you have like only 2 mods. Now if they could be rare, you get 4 mods, that'd be a little bit of a different story. Maybe it would make it even more difficult and interesting. But for now, 2 mod flasks, I really don't like the idea of there also being tiers. It's just, yeah, annoying. Like, I've definitely burned through a lot of alterations trying to get seething, staunching, life flask in the past. Also gotten really lucky sometimes, which feels good. They've also talked about adding proactive flask mods versus reactive flask mods, which will be different depending on if it's a utility, life, or mana flasks, and how like when you're hitting a life flask, that's going to be reactive. Like you don't hit your life flask because you expect to take damage. You hit it once you take damage. So adding mods that would make that interesting, and how like the adrenaline mod might be different on a life flask than it is on a Quicksilver flask. And like on the adrenaline on life, it might be like when you use this flask and you're not at full health, you gain onslaught for 8 seconds or something, which I think sounds kind of neat. Then he went on to talk about Delve League and how it wasn't received very well. Maybe it was too confusing, or it was just bad timing. And it, like, I really don't understand like why this like made it to the notes, but for me, Delve seemed like a decent league. I played it. I think it was like a weird timing, just like in the US, and so it just didn't get that much well received. But how they're going to be changing Delve so that there's a possibility, potentiality that like 1500 depth, it like gets really, really hard, like super duper hard, maybe like 1000 to 1500, and they kind of bring back that super difficult Delve, super rewarding Delve feel. They also talked a little bit about empty chests and league mechanic and kind of why they were there. And Chris kind of said like this was intentional because as opposed, like there was either like, well, when you click on a chest, a couple of things pop out and people are mad because they have to pick up a couple of things, or you click on a chest, nothing happens, and then you click the third one and a whole bunch of stuff pops out and you get to pick up a whole bunch. And the guys on Baeclast are like, well, then why are the empty chests even clickable? Like, I'm not getting any loot. Maybe the chest should open automatically. Like, it just feels bad. And hopefully they took that feedback and be kind of building it into other things. He also goes on to talking about other splinters in the game and how like picking up Chaeola splinters at like 1C feels good because, they're worth money. But for me personally, Chaeola splinters, even at 1C, feel kind of bad because like if you're doing the Lyra Arthane breach farming, you're picking up like 13 of them at a time. Like, yay, I'm picking up 13C, but it's like clicking 13, 14, 15 times to pick up all that stuff feels bad. And there should be some way to like, if I pick up one of them, all of them in a radius or something goes up to you. They also talked about how they have no intentions at all to change pickup radius. They said that they were happy where pickup radius was, even though items get lost in spots where you can't pick them up occasionally. Sometimes people are body blocked by bosses and other stuff. I kind of disagree with this. He made a comment about being worried that it would change pathing on console. From what I understand, picking up loot in console as well is kind of difficult. But yeah. Now, we don't care about hard mode. I don't care about D2. I do care about quality of life. And they mentioned the UI, getting UI quality of life and things that like need to be on the UI. And Chris once again gave us the same boilerplate answer about how the branding needs to be looking a certain way. We want people to look at the game and know that they're playing the game, not there being 800 million different options for playing PoE. Which I just disagree with. I think the base UI is so old, so bad, it's just not any good. And there's things like Rage, which are really terrible to see, Steel Shards are really terrible to see, Adrenaline, or even Flask Uptime, all really terrible. Chris did say that he has a cute dog, ultra-wide monitor, and he also like gets upset. Like, I thought this was funny because the big boy headhunter builds like make him cringe. But that with the big ultra wide monitors, it's hard to see your mini map, your life globe, your mana. Like, the UI needs work. And honestly, at this point, branding, yeah, I just think it's a really poor excuse. Like, I understand how you want to keep it that way, but I feel like Path of Exile is moved from a different game than where it used to be. So Path of Exile used to be like, oh, is that like game like Diablo 3? Now Path of Exile is like the lead ARPG. When people talk about ARPGs, Path of Exile is brought up almost exclusively as one of the like first games that they talk about. And so I don't think that you have the same like necessary need to like really lock in a certain look. Instead, like, because that to me like feels like you're kind of like the smaller company trying to like make a name for yourself and try to like establish your brand. What Path of Exile needs, to me personally, is just having like a better experience for the players that are already playing it. Like, you need to make the we're the big boy, we're the leader of the pack type of decisions, as opposed to the scared nobody's gonna know who I am type of decisions. Moving on. 315 was just too many nerfs, and I just didn't think there was too many new carrots. Like, a lot of new skills were either bugged, undertuned, or uninspired. I mean, Champion literally got a banner. They got a banner. When I saw the skills and I saw Champion got a banner, I didn't want to play the league. Because when the idea of the skill was you hold the banner and then you put it down on the ground, it's like, nobody wants to put banners on the ground almost ever. It is super annoying to do, and the banner itself isn't very good. Why didn't you add anything else? It was, it felt very uninspired. And I heard that some of the skills, like just performing poor visually or just way undertuned. I mean, they had to buff that one skill by 400% more damage. Yeah. I also think here that mid-league buffs and nerfs would be fine as long as they're expected. They talk a little bit about how they try to avoid both of these for different reasons, but I feel like if you knew there was going to be a week 3 balance pass every league, then that would be fine. It's just like you've set this expectation that you don't do this mid-league balance passes, and so it creates like a different feel. And so it's like, oh man, I tried playing this particular skill, it sucked. Like, you just know it's going to suck for the next 13 weeks. Why even try? So at least there being some sort of light on the horizon that like, hey, GGG is looking at stuff. They will be making some changes. They'll be talking some stuff. Like, even if it was even like they did like a 6-week balance pass, you might have people be like, oh, wow, like this particular skill is now really, really good. I'm going to come back. I'm going to check it out. I was playing other games. I'm going to come back and do something. It adds content to the game as well. And it's basically like when it's mid-league balancing like on a whim, when they think that it's a big enough problem, that's really, really bad. But if it's scheduled, that's really good. I think that maybe there should even be some content that is time gated or community gated. Like, once people have done enough breaches or other things like that, they kind of be like unlocked. Like I kind of felt this way a little bit with Heist, where some contracts became later in the game, and that was kind of cool. It kind of wasn't cool that all of those bosses gave garbage loot. So, you know, if they made that better, I think it would be really cool. Next up, we came into testing and alpha testing for leagues and kind of what's going on in there. And Chris mentioned that alpha testing leaks are one of the reasons why we can't have nice things. And he really asked alpha testers to stop leaking stuff. And he mentioned that maybe we should kick all of our alpha testers out and then make people sign NDAs so that and get documentation that will sue them if they leak stuff. And I'm just like, dude, it's 2021. If like you can't put your alpha under NDA, like you have a massive problem. And I personally think for me, this, you know, you might totally disagree with this. I think it would be not a big deal if at the end of every single league, normally there's a time where the league goes down and then the Friday next the league comes up, right? There's like a week right there. What if in that week the new league just went into the old one? And so you can take all your old characters, heck, you can take your standard characters and try stuff out. Test out the league mechanic, test out the new skills, see how they feel. Yes, this would diminish hype a little bit, but what it would do is it would also build a little bit of hype, because people are playing the league not just because they want to test out the new stuff, but they want to be able to interact with the economy. Nothing feels worse than league starting a skill that turns out to be garbage. And it forces people then to play skills that they might not enjoy as much, because they're like, okay, so I know that EDC didn't get nerfed again, so I'm just going to go load up my favorite EDC guide, and then I'm just going to play that again, and then week 2, I'm going to figure out what skill looks the most fun, and then I'm going to play something fun. That's not as cool as being like, hey, I'm going to play the new skill. I tested it out, and I actually did pretty good. It's, you know, gotten approval, and there's a couple of build guides looking at it, as opposed to like Crackling Lance, which like a ton of people played in Heist League, and actually I think kind of caused Heist League to do as poorly as it did, because so many people were like, oh yeah, I tried that skill, I got to yellow maps, and I'm forever scarred. Please never mention Crackling Lance ever again. I'm sorry if I have actually triggered you in this video. I should put a warning in the very beginning that we're going to talk about Crackling Lance. But yeah, like I think that you can get around that just by having more testing for your league. Yes, I know diminishes his hype a little bit, but I think that people really get into Path of Exile not just because like they want to play the new stuff, but they also want to have a good time playing the new stuff. And the fresh economy is a big part of that. And so allowing people to play the new stuff in the fresh economy is big bueno. Next up, they kind of talked about how in 2 years, they might have a public beta for PoE 2, which to me seems like a long time. That's basically going to be 4 years from their announcement at ExileCon that they're going to have a public beta. I understand COVID's a thing. They said that they are pretty much done with Act 1, 75% done at Act 2, which means they're not even done Act 2 yet. Like, kind of makes me concerned that they are like massively churning their wheels on PoE 2, and it's super far from being ready. They also said that they wanted to hire like 100 world tier artists. And so if you're a really good graphic artist, please, you know, go email them. They're working with people international as well. But yeah, like I'm like wondering what the heck's been going on, because we've kind of been told that like all this special stuff is going on because of PoE 2, and it's just not ready at all. It's very concerning. Super concerning. Next up, we talked about leveling and the campaign, and there's no sight or sound of non-campaign leveling systems. And they felt that they're working on the campaign, so it's going to be fun and enjoyable. And honestly, this next section made me yell at the monitor more than any other section. And one thing I do want to point out is the guys on Baeclast did a really stellar job of asking some really hard, really difficult questions, some uncomfortable questions even, but Tarky Cat really hammered home here his questions about the campaign, about adding some sort of other option for people that don't enjoy the campaign. And Chris basically denied him 3 times, literally. Tarky was even like, so if, regardless of how nice you make the campaign, if I'm the type of player who's not going to like to play it after like my first time, what do you say to them? And Chris was kind of like, well, we're just going to make the campaign as nice as we possibly can, which to me is disappointing. I don't like the idea. And like he kind of actually gave 2 different parts of information in the follow-up sentences. He was basically like, PoE 2 is going to be a better, more fun, faster experience to get to maps, but it's also going to be the same length as the original. And so I'm like, okay, so is it more fun, more engaging and fast, or is it still 8 hours? Because they asked like, hey, like, is the PoE 1 campaign going to be sped up? And he was like, no. But they're going to be equal. And to me, this is like, if the PoE 1 campaign is too long and unenjoyable, I don't understand how you can make the PoE 2 campaign better if still the same amount of time. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. You basically have to play a mini game. That's really what it is, for 4 to 8 hours every single time that you want to play a new character. And if you play hardcore, you have to play a mini game every single time you die, which, depending on who you are, that could be quite a lot of mini games. I personally would find with the ability to do the campaign once per league, and then you're able to skip it in the future. But yeah, like, it really kills down my desire to re-roll characters, and normally I have to like make events out of me re-rolling because I don't enjoy it really very much otherwise. For me, campaign is literally just a stall until you can make it to the real part of the game. Chris thinks that we don't like the campaign because it's not fun enough or difficult enough. That's kind of why you're seeing the mob difficulty going up in Act 1, which you should expect to be seeing in the future. The entire rest of the story probably getting more difficult, slower. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go through and do the entire PoE 1 monster types, and leveling takes like 10 hours for like an average player. To me, that's a bad thing. Maybe you disagree. I think that maps are the real part of the game because you really can't find anything worthwhile before maps. Like, there's a big difference between an I-84 hat and a item level 63 hat, which you can find like while leveling. The times that I've found something that is worthwhile to keep while going on my way to maps are few and far between, and in fact they're so rare that I can like individually remember them. Like last league, I found a ring. It was life based, had life, had res, had a unveiled endurance charge on kill, and I was like, you know what, this ring's not great, but I'm just gonna keep it just cuz. And yeah, I kept it for the rest of the league on that character. Now note, I wasn't going for super fancy gear on my steel character that league, so it just fit in. But for the most part, the leveling process is just a mini game where you really can't get anything super good. Yeah, some people will find a mirror, some people will maybe find a few exalts, but for the most part, the actual gear that you find up off the ground is super temporary, and you're probably going to replace it by going to trade site, typing in like X amount of life, X amount of res, and just replacing almost all your slots through trade like that. Yeah, and so they also talked about changing the atlas a little bit because a lot of people were concerned about the end game atlas and maps being too long and slow. They're potentially going to be reducing the atlas regions down from 8 to 4 and only be half of the watchstones, so you can start farming Cirrus a little bit earlier, and only 100 maps, and they'll like kind of rotate maps in and out of the current pool. So maybe there'll be a league where Burial Chambers isn't available, or whatever your favorite map or your least favorite map won't be on the atlas at all. So I think that's kind of good. I've wanted them to reduce the number of maps for a while. The more and more maps they add, the less I'm like desiring to go through and do all of them. There's actually a few maps that I've barely even done at all since they've added. So I think this will be a decent change. How this is going to affect the Maven regions is to be seen. Next up, we talked about loot on the ground, and Chris said that wisdom scrolls are important, and you can't just like filter out the based on the items, like the mods on an item, because otherwise then your loot filter just plays the game for you, which I kind of felt was a kind of a bad take, because your loot filter basically already does do this, but it just filters based off the base. And so there's probably been plenty of really good items on the ground that I've literally not even seen because it's been filtered out, because I want less junk on my screen. The more money you have, the less likely you are wanting to pick up at a full inventory full of rare gear. In fact, most like top end game filters are just people like currency, things that sell for a lot, certain divination cards, and zoom, 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 zoom. So I think it would be cool if you could filter like, hey, like show me every rare that has tier 1 life on it. Show me every rare that has over 100 resistance on it. That would be cool. Also, Chris talked about not rendering the filtered out parts of your loot filter, which I think would be great. Now, that's like the entire filter thing would be like no rendering. I think that would save a lot of people a lot of crashes and lag, which would be nice. They also plan on making wisdom scrolls and certain currencies in a certain range drop less frequently, but in stacks. So you might drop like 1/10 of the wisdom scrolls, but they would like occasionally drop in a stack of 10. I think that'd be really nice. I hate picking up wisdom scrolls. I hate picking up portal scrolls. In fact, I typically play a couple exalts on a normal league for wisdom scrolls, transmutes, all that stuff, just so I don't have to pick them up myself. And typically a pretty good use of my time. They also talked about not using wisdom scrolls in the future, and Chris didn't really want to give them a good answer for that. He also did not want to implement vacuum looting at all. Instead, wanted to consolidate stacks of splinters and things. And Nuki was kind of like, but what if like when you have the loot shower feels really good, but then the clicking all of it feels bad. So what if you like had the loot shower, but then you only had to click one thing to it all up, kind of like last epoch? And Chris was kind of so-so on that. They talked about auras on rares, and Chris admitted that they were not in a good place, and how they originally were going to be working on this on 3.16, but they booted it to 3.17, which is like 5 months away at this point. They are probably going to be reworking how monster buffs and everything look and appear, so it's a little bit easier for you to interact with them and understand what they have, as opposed to being a list of things that you can only see if you are hovering over top of it. And I'm kind of just like, okay, that's great, but in the meantime, in the in-between time, can you like chop some of the aura shenanigans down? Because it's not very fun to like go around a corner and be like, oh, there are 6 rares here that all have auras and they make everything a death zone. If you don't have ranged, if you know you can't get into the proximity shield that's in there, you just die. And for me, that's not very fun. They also said, speaking about auras, that they're going to be looking at aura bots. Not necessarily clear what they're going to be doing with that. They felt that auras right now are pretty good if you're casting them for yourself, but they didn't necessarily like the fact that you can have one player in your party just focusing pure auras. Chris does admit that he needs to be more in the forefront, being like the face of the company and talking about the differences. He thinks that things get bad when he's not out there talking to people and kind of letting the community know that they're listening. So he'll be on more podcasts and stuff, which I think is good. I think it's super brave of Chris to go on any podcast with anybody for 3.5 hours and just weather nonstop questions. And like there was definitely some times in the podcast where he was like reading off of their internal tools of notes from meetings, and he's probably gonna get a ton of crap for this, but I think that's super brave. Even if it's not necessarily the best decision, I think that's pretty cool to do. So I like that. He did admit that they might need to make a wiki And Chris didn't really seem to know what was going on with it. He even mentioned that he was like staying away from the drama about the wiki, and he needs people to like kind of email him about that. And this is kind of like a reoccurring theme where from like this point on, where like if Chris didn't really know what was going on, he was like, hey, just email me at chris@grindinggear so we can figure out what's going on with this thing. Which, rip his inbox, man. I'm willing to bet that he doesn't actually go through all of his emails himself. He has some sort of support person that's helping him out there, but dag, I feel for that person. He also kind of mentioned that crafting is a reward for people who are smart, which was kind of like a result of like the wiki thing and the result of the, needing third-party tools. And I really don't like this take that kind of things are so hidden and unclear in the game, because they're talking about like upgrading the gear that you have and how like you should be able to have this feel of dropping better items. And Nuki was kind of like, well, then how do I know how to upgrade my stuff without like looking at a third-party site to figure things out? And he was kind of like, maybe we can work on that a little bit. Ryze also talked a little about crits from monsters and how they're not telegraphed, they're not consistent. And Chris was like, well, we do need spike damage, so maybe we can make monsters crit more frequently, but somehow telegraph that, to which Ryze stopped talking about crits from monsters. Because he was like, I got crit by Uber and Siri, it's not fair. And so like, oh no, what have I done? Monsters are going to crit twice as much. And he was like, I also want the ability to invest in defense to avoid being crit. Like, I don't care if it causes me to do less damage. It's just not an option right now. So I thought that was also a good take by Ryze there. I personally think that they just need better combat, period. Right now, like, your number one defense is clear speed, which kind of leads into like a looping problem. And really the combat, especially like Ultimatum, I think like really put a spotlight on how bad Path of Exile combat is right now. Because like in the beginning, Ultimatum kind of felt cool because like all these monsters keep coming, I have to stand in certain spots, but eventually it just turned into run in a circle, kill stuff, and pray to God you don't die. So little interaction. It was like you either run in a circle and kill everything and get to the next phase, or you run in a circle and you die. If you stop to self-cast, if you stop to attack for too long, you die. And so it just doesn't really feel like it's actually combat. It looks like it doesn't feel good. And doesn't feel like you're actually interacting or actually playing anything or actually caring what the enemy is, because the answer is always to go in a circle around it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what it is. And guess what? They're actually working on minion AI to predict that and attack you anyways, which I think is going to make combat maybe even worse, because there won't be any counterplay to that. Next up, we moved into MTX and a lot of questions. Honestly, I totally thought at this point that the podcast was done and they kind of went into overtime. And they asked some really hard questions when it came to MTX and monetization. They asked about the supporter packs, and Chris kind of said, like, if the market says that these new supporter pack systems aren't good enough, then we'll look at it. So if you don't like the idea that there's like $90 supporter pack for more stuff, don't freaking buy it. That's basically what he said. I kind of disagree with this take a little bit, mostly because, well, getting feedback based off of the people who don't buy, supporter packs, whether or not people are spending money, like there should be a little bit more information about that. There are definitely a lot of people who aren't happy with the current system. They also asked about why is there no MTX preview or demo mode, and Chris kind of blew it off as like, I'd rather spend that time developing anything else in Path of Exile, blah, blah, blah. But then he also said that it would probably be really easy for them to make. Which I kind of just think this was like just bad. Like I did not like his particular reactions to that. For me personally, the fact that Path of Exile doesn't have any sort of preview or dresser type of thing is just so mind-boggling. Like, it's mind-boggling to me that people can go into the store and buy wings that cost the price of full games without ever seeing what they look like in the game. Like, I'm going to go spend $32 on Starfall Wings. What do they look like? Well, the only thing I can see is a short YouTube video that doesn't really show the actual angles that you play the game at, doesn't actually show the lighting. It is just like not really good indicator of what they look like. And I was like, how the heck do you not have this? I mean, Wilson has like a dress up kind of mode that feels really, really good. And when I saw that, I was like, Path of Exile needs this like today. People would buy more stuff if they could see how things look, if you could try stuff out. I've said that basically, I thought that would be a cool idea if every single time things went on sale, that you could wear any of the things in here, for free. Just try them on, and if you like them, you can buy them. And when the sale ends, you would have a limited time to purchase the things that you're trying out. And I think that'd be really, really neat. I think it would allow people to try out different MTX, figure out things you like, figure out things that work together. I shouldn't have to rely on a YouTube video or a YouTube preview by a content creator in order to see what the MTX looks like in the game, especially if I'm paying for $23 for a wing that's on sale. Like, to me, that's ludicrous pricing and ludicrous lack of information. Next, they went into loot boxes, which I was really surprised that they even started talking about. It doesn't seem like they're getting rid of loot boxes anytime soon. This was kind of like a very strange conversation. Basically, kind of found out that loot boxes potentially are providing about 1/3 of all of the income for Path of Exile, which to me is a little bit strange because kind of the funnel system for how money gets spent in PoE is a little bit strange. For the most part, I'm willing to bet that a lot of people are buying supporter packs and then they're spending those points onto loot boxes. So it's like taking that $60, $90 and just into a loot box. And they kind of talked about different options for dealing with the loot boxes, making them a little bit more like user friendly, less gambly, and it didn't really feel comfortable about doing that. And Chris did say that it wasn't really a real number for the 1/3, but you can guesstimate based off the amount of time and effort and energy that they put into loot boxes, that and the fact that they're like a negative press piece, that there are, you know, some serious money coming from loot boxes. Chris also, like, Nugi was like, well, what if the legislation moves faster than you're expecting and you guys kind of like aren't able to do loot boxes? Like, what is kind of your plan here? And Chris was like, hey, if you have any great ideas for monetization or battle pass stuff, email it to me. So yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't mind seeing a battle pass type of situation, especially if you like paid $60, you got some points back so you can buy the next battle pass with the battle pass if you did all 40 challenges or whatever. Like, they're already doing a system where like you get rewards at certain breakpoints. It's just there's no paid component of it, right? So I think it could be cool if they added more stuff, and you can even add stuff in the battle pass that like isn't things that you normally buy anyways, like the portrait frame and crap like that. Chris apparently gets kind of like a boiled down version of the state of the Reddit, at least this league, with like important threads and conversations that are going on. And I kind of got the feel of like it would be kind of cool if they had some sort of streamer Discord server, or like some sort of connection with like the PoE partner program. They talked about doing a Path of Exile partner program, but then nothing is happening with it. It's gotten rolled back or something, or they are only for the Nexus.gg store. We can buy MTX through streamers. Yeah, like, I don't know what's going on with that. I think it'd be good if like we had some sort of ability to kind of like have a conversation in a place where GG can kind of like see that a little bit. And mostly just like there are other games that have kind of partner programs that do draw a lot of information and kind of state of the Reddit or state of the kind of the player base based off of their content creators, which, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to like having implemented Path of Exile. The they kind of talked about how the league kind of was nerfs from every angle and how they kind of piled on a ton of nerfs, and how like they figured might as well put more nerfs in because people are going to hate this league anyways, and how they wanted a big meta shift, and that there is a big meta shift in the game, but we can't see it because we're limited to what Poe Ninja shows us. But for me, what Poe Ninja shows us is exactly what Path of Exile decides to show us with the Ladder API. If you're not familiar, basically Poe Ninja has a section where you can look at what people are playing. You just click up here in builds, and you can see everything that's going on. And you can see, like, for example, an expedition, what the breakdown is of all the different ascendancies. But this is only for people that are 94 and above. Well, this information is basically coming here from these ladders here. So if I go to Expedition here, this is the ladder of every single person who is in Expedition. And if we go to the very last page, the bottom of this is 94. And so if they expanded this out past 15,000 characters to, I don't know, like 100,000 characters or something like that, yeah, that might be a little bit straining on their API. But it would give us some bigger understanding of what's actually going on in the meta. And I've actually felt like in general that the Poe Ninja kind of breakdown has been leading to some weird misconceptions in the league, but we just literally can't see anything more. So yeah. Defensive options, they also talked a little bit about how they've been stripping them down time and time again, from Flasks to things on the tree, and how there will be nerfing Fortify next league, how it's like their one nerf that they're pushing through, and it's going to be nerfing Fortify for casters and just non-melee in general, which as a steel skill main, I'm not super hyped about. I always kind of felt that Fortify should just give you less spell damage, less minion damage or something. Like, yeah. Like, I understand that like it's supposed to be this melee tool, but they've kind of gone like all these different ways to try to make it better for melee, but not make it worse for other classes. And they even like took out all the Fortify effect on the tree recently, not all of it, but most of it, as an attempt to nerf it even more. And I feel like a big part of that is just like they saw Lighty literally face tank the Maven explosion with like the perfect gear, the focus thing going, dropping his banner at the same time. And so he was actually taking like almost no damage, which is like such a corner case, such a Reddit highlight type of thing. Most people aren't doing that at all, ever, at any point in their gameplay experience. People aren't dropping banners in the first place. So yeah. Anyways, this has been a really long video, and I do apologize for that. If you want to see me make a video kind of about like why I haven't been playing the league at all, or haven't playing very much, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about the podcast. If you watched it, let me know what you thought about this wrap up. What did I miss? What did I hit the nail on the head? What did I completely whiff on? Let me know. Thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate you. And see you next time.